Welcome to Flagon Talk, a weekly podcast where a few random people get together, talk all things tabletop RPG, and answer your questions about D&D and related games. Today's topic is New Player Who Dis. I'm Friendly Neighborhood DM, and I'm joined by
Lao Fang Xiao.
And we are here to answer some questions from the Dungeons and Flagons Discord community. And hopefully unpack a little bit about D&D, other RPGs. And so let's get to our first question. Let us get to our...
I'll take this, I guess. So,
yeah.
no Grand on the server asks us, how do we try to welcome new players to the table, particularly when some of the players have been playing for what seems like forever and seem so much more comfortable in role-playing their characters? I get this all the time, because I started playing D&D back in, ninth grade, and I played kind of on and off for like a year or two, and then took like a 3 to 4 year hiatus and started back in 2015 and been playing basically ever since. So I have at least like 3, kind of 4 years under my belt of D&D, and I can definitely say, yeah, starting off, it's hard. You don't really know what to do. You don't know what's wrong, good thing, bad thing to say. And I know, yeah, you've been only playing for like 2 years, something like that.
Year and a half and change. I had a brush with D&D in college. My college had a D&D group. And suffice to say, I chickened out. I went to one meeting and I was like, nope, this is way too geeky for me. And I didn't go back. And that's one of my college regrets. Looking back on it, I wish I had gone into it sooner, because it is a fascinating system. So
I guess trying to start it off, because there's kind of two sides to this question. I guess we should focus on, as a new player, what can you do to basically not feel like, basically get a little bit more comfortable in, I guess, the more role-playing aspect of the game? What do you think?
I think it really just comes down to have fun with it.
Yeah.
There is no, in D&D, the best thing about D&D is there is no wrong answer. There is no wrong way to do something. So if it feels organic, it feels right for the moment, do it. I mean, I'm not saying, go and kill all your fellow players, because that feels right for the moment, but just have fun.
Yeah, like maybe you're the barbarian who stuff, and then like maybe the bard or the sorcerer or the paladin is like sitting on the table dancing and stuff like that. And you're like, this guy's being annoying. Like, you're like, DM, can I trip him? And they're like, sure. Like, is that a dick move? Maybe. Did it make a really funny moment at the bar's face planting into a pile of potatoes? Yes. So
yeah, there's no wrong answers when it comes to it. Literally have fun with it. The biggest thing is have fun.
Yeah,
you are not going to be shamed for something that you do at this. It's kind of like Fight Club.
Yeah. It's definitely that. And the big thing is, a lot of people are like, oh, well, this group has been like playing forever. It's like, it's kind of generic, but at some point that those people were you. It was their first time ever playing. They didn't really know what was going on between a D8 and a D10 was, and what's the D percentile? Oh my God, what is this? And they didn't really understand. And it's the reason that they are so comfortable is because they have played enough. Some people maybe a little more comfortable. Others, I know a couple of people I've basically DM'd for brand new. They might be a little more comfortable because they maybe have some like theater or performance background, just because they're more comfortable talking about people. But no, it's like I said, do whatever you want. But the big thing is, especially if you're a new player, you don't always like to say is, you don't need to talk in character. You don't need to put on a silly voice. You don't need to say. You don't need to talk in first person. If you like literally like you're at the table, everyone's talking, and you're just kind of like, I don't know, like Grognak would like to go and talk to the innkeep and ask about like the missing the missing child. That's fine. If you just want to say, I would like my character would like to do this. If you just do that, it should be fine. Don't make it think like you're like, oh, I'm missing out on the game because I'm not talking in character. I know so many people they don't talk in character, and we create some of the craziest moments just because like you
That
you
being
just
said,
know
if you feel like you want to talk in character and put on a silly voice because it feels organic to your character, then by all means do so.
Oh yeah. I have a my favorite voice to do right now is I have a half orc fighter. His name is Hits. He likes to hit things, and it's really fun. And like yeah, and for those of you like who like maybe you've been playing for a little bit and you kind of want to get into the voice, just like what I say is like if you're from some place, like for example, I'm from the South, like basically southeastern United States, and so I can pull out a Southern accent a little bit whenever I kind of want to, and that's just a natural accent I can kind of do, and it's different enough that I have a lot of characters who talk with a Southern accent. Just because it's different from my own voice, and people know I'm talking character when I'm talking like this. Now I'll go back to my normal voice because I don't want to do that for too long.
You'll just start getting into it. We won't get you out of it.
Oh no, I get stuck in pirate accents. That's where I get stuck.
Oh no! Hey, it's
No,
almost
but
Pirate Day.
I thought pirate. Either way, but no, yeah. So don't worry about, like I said, don't worry about talking in character. Don't worry about putting on silly voice. Like to start off, just do whatever you're comfortable with. If it's one
And
of those things you,
sometimes you don't even need to change your voice. It can literally be the cadence of your words.
yeah,
You can
like
take long pauses, and that's
yes,
how your character talks. Or you
okay,
can
William Shatner.
draw out words really slow. You
Yeah,
don't need to change your accent to give your character I mean, again, just talking normal is 100% valid as well.
yeah. So like I said, your players just like don't worry, just leave like when in doubt, like you're not gonna is it if you're not gonna really mess up role playing. It's really hard to mess up role playing, but for
Mm-hmm.
mechanics and stuff like that, if say if like your buddy brought you into this game and like they're a player, not the DM. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
when in doubt, sit next to someone who seems kind of like what they're doing, and always kind of if like, maybe the DM's middle of something, you're kind of confused what's going on. Be like maybe just like kind of just whisper over the person like, hey, like I don't really understand like what this means or something like that, and like
Mm-hmm.
sit next to it. Like that's why whenever I have people help other people make characters, I'm sorry, like sit next to the person that made your character, or or if you decided to play a wizard, then there's another wizard at the table, sit next to the wizard.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly just because they know how to play that class. So if you have questions, you can ask them.
Yeah.
Not saying you can't ask your DM, but sometimes
Yeah.
people might feel like they're interrupting the flow of the game. And when in doubt, like I know it's back going all back to middle school, like basically middle school, but raise your hand. Like raise your hand and be like, and maybe once the DM has a moment, he'll kind of they'll look over to you and be like, "Do you have a question?" And be like, "Yeah, like I kind of like maybe like I want to do this, but I don't understand where how I would
Mm-hmm.
do this." And just like, when did I ask? Because the big thing is the longer you wait to ask your questions that you need to ask in order for you to understand, the more awkward it's going to be for you to, or going to feel for you. And basically, when in doubt, if you go ahead and ask the questions now, and basically your first session is just questions, and you get a good understanding of it, you know what the next session is going to be? Just you're going to go at it, have fun. You're going to all the stuff. You have a basic understanding of what you need to do, and then hey, you're good to go. Like you're able to do this. So
And I
I
think that
think
kind of
that's
leads. I can think that leads into our next question,
yeah,
which this was, the kind of on the player side. This deals more with the DM. This
yeah.
is from Cactus. They ask, "What are
Cactus.
Cactus? Love that. What special things can a DM do or prepare make a beginner take to the game at least somewhat better. The biggest thing, at least from my point of view, pre-gens, especially if you're playing uh, in an actual store, you're not playing online. It's a little bit harder to have a pre-gen made up, although I do actually have some for new players who really just want to jump in and experience the game. But it's a little bit harder to do online, but especially in stores, pre-gens, pre-generated characters is what we're talking about. So then your players can literally be like, I want to play a fighter. I want to play somebody who does magic. I want to play somebody who shoots a bow. And you literally hand them a piece of paper and go, here you go.
And ideally have them be pre-gens that you have basically either have read extensively or you
Mm-hmm.
made yourself. I have a
Yeah.
stack of 6 pre-generated characters that I basically, and when in doubt, I'm like, whenever I hand someone a character, I'm like, just here's how this character plays.
Mm-hmm.
If you have anything, ask me. I know this character like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
I may
Go
not
over
know every
that
single number,
character.
but when
Yeah.
in doubt, it gives them that thing of like they're like, they look at me and like, oh, this person knows exactly how to play this character. So if I want to do something, ask them. Like I
Mm-hmm.
had like 2 weeks ago, I ran a game for a guy who's never played D&D before. I handed him a half-orc barbarian, and after like half the session, he just started going on with it. And that's because he felt very comfortable asking me questions about what to do. And
Yeah.
that's what he basically is. The big thing is, even if it's starting off, like if you're like playing with the new players, just be like have the general table thing. Just be like, hey, understand, like just don't feel free to ask questions, or and especially if you're like a table with like a lot of new people, like some new people and some old people who've been playing for a while. Be like, when in doubt, like if I'm in the middle of reading something, or if it's kind of in the middle of stuff, just when in doubt, ask the person next to you, as long as it doesn't interrupt the game or anything like that, or
Mm-hmm.
even if it does, like if it's something that like a lot of people seem confused about, do that. And as a
Yeah.
DM, the big thing is, especially if you're doing like an adventure that has some a little bit of structure, and you are basically maybe like a pre-made adventure, kind of like a D&D module. After like the first part, stop and just ask, does anybody have any questions?
Yep.
And some people might not necessarily raise their hands or like chime in, but be like, or maybe explain like, hey, so this situation I just did, um, basically explain how it goes. For example,
Yeah.
a lot of my go-to adventure starts off with an investigation, and I kind of go through that, and sometimes people kind of stayed back, and then as I stop and I explain. So basically, this is what happened. Like this person noticed that this thing was going on, so they decided to do this. And I explained, well, you could have actually done this, got to approach it this way, or approach it this way. So they just went through a situation. I explained to them, hey, this is what you could have done differently and got achieved the same results.
Yep, and
And
there is no wrong answers. I mean, I don't know how much I can stress that enough when it comes to new players.
yeah,
Is also another really great thing is when it comes to making people uh, new players feel at home at a table. Run an adventure that has all 3 pillars of play:
yeah,
exploration, combat, roleplay. It does not need to be a dungeon dive. I mean, not saying that dungeon dives are not fun, because I run a lot of fun dungeon dives, but having a mixture and showcasing what D&D can be. One of my favorite modules that showcases that is actually Adventures League module called A Day at the Races. It is an
everyone loves data
amazing
races.
it is an amazingly fun, exciting, new player friendly module to play. It has all 3 pillars of play, and it showcases each of them very well.
Yeah, which
Uh,
I guess pillars for those you don't know, it's combat. You see, combat, exploration, social, but it was one of those. And the big thing about, especially kind of going a little bit away from the AL thing on the home game, if you say you have a group, or you're starting a brand new group, and you you basically have a brand new group, and you don't really know this group this well. Maybe they haven't played with you much. Like, yeah, like design an adventure that has a little bit, even if it's like the stereotypical like murder mystery at the noble's castle. Like you guys come in, and it's the big thing, especially with new players. If you run an adventure that starting off has a little bit of the stereotypical tropes to it,
Mm-hmm.
The new players will understand, okay, I kind of get where the story's going,
It's
and
like
or
playing
in
a
either
game of Clue.
yeah, they know what they say. They kind of know what's going to happen. However, how they get to each destination can be extremely different.
Yeah. I don't think
And
I don't think I've run one game that has gone exactly the same way every single time.
yeah, and so it's you just basically make for adventures like make an adventure that is easy to digest, not super complicated. If you want to add like basically don't have like the super like big like political meeting where all the five rulers of the nations are coming in and the new players
Hmm.
like
Or
what?
an intricate puzzle that will hang them up for an hour.
Yeah, it's and the thing you do, even though you might not necessarily want to do it, especially if you're a DM or GM who's bringing someone into a pre-existing game, give them a rundown of like what has happened and kind of journal things, just general things, so they don't feel like that they're coming in not knowing anything that's going on. Like I actually have in my home game, I'm gonna have a brand new player come in. He's actually a player who plays in another game that's currently on hiatus. And once he decides the character, I'm really gonna basically either sit down with him or just like text him and be like, "Hey,
This
here's
is
kind of
what you
general layout.
know.
Yeah, here's what's going on. Here's what's happened in the story so far. Your character wouldn't know this, but I want you to know this. So
Hmm.
one thing is you can understand like why people are doing this. So you don't feel left out because
But
that's the big thing.
also, yeah, but also give them kind of like what your character would know low down.
Yeah, or yeah, and doing that, it's like just yeah, like I said, it's when in doubt, like we say, like players work with their DM, DM work with your players. It's talk with them, and the big thing is there's a lot of actually good resources out there for stuff and for figuring out and do whatever you can to make it easier. The one thing I dropped a good bit of money on is I invested in the official fifth edition spell cards, and the main reason I bought them is because a couple of my pre-gens are spellcasters, and I want to have the situation. Someone's like, "I'm picking this character." I'm like, "Okay, here are the cards." And like, I explain like, "These are what you can do."
Hmm.
Whenever there's downtime, just kind of skim them. You don't even understand what any of these words mean. Just have a general idea what's going on. For example, I'm like, magic missile, and I'm like, there's a player I did recently. They're like, what can I do? I'm like, well. You can see someone just their head hanging over the edge of a cliff. However, it's going to be really hard to get a shot, but you do have the spell magic missile, and you notice about halfway down the text, what does that say? And they're like, it's or basically it's like, oh, target you can see missiles automatically hit. I'm like, oh, and you see that would be really good in this situation.
Yep.
You can kind of see the person. If you really want to hit them, it might be a good idea to cast a spell. I'm not telling them to do it. I'm like, this is something that you could in this situation that
Yeah.
your character may have thought
And
of
I
because your character knows what spells they have, but you don't know what spells they
Yeah.
have.
And I feel like at lower level play, I feel like it's almost like having a person with training wheels. You have the training wheels, you're teaching them.
Yeah.
As a DM, you are there as a facilitator of story, but you are also a teacher. You also have to make sure that your players understand what is going on, especially when it comes to new players. I mean, and this even goes for like online. If I have a new player who comes into my game, I actually one of the things I do online as a primarily online DM is alongside the module that I'm running, I actually have their character sheet up and viewable. So then I can see kind of, what resources they have. So if they get in a pickle and they're like, well, I really don't know what to do in this situation, I can kind of give a quick glance and go, well, you're a rogue. You're really good at sneaking. You're really good at lock picking. You're really good at acrobatics and climbing and shenanigans like that. So why? And they're having a hard time infiltrating this building. You have lock picks. You could lock pick the door, or do you see that balcony up there on that second story? You could most definitely reach that with an acrobatics check and attempt to get into the house through the window.
Yeah, it's if you give players the options they might necessarily have thought of, that will make them think a little bit later on, like, oh, I can do this, or even have that they can maybe have that moment click in their head of like, wait, I can do whatever I want. I just have to
Hmm.
ask,
I
and
mean, and
you
that's
can
the
have that
biggest
moment.
thing. That's the biggest thing, especially with new players and DMs. I think if a new player comes to you and says, I want to do a backflip off of the carriage that I'm on onto the carriage that we are currently pursuing and kick open the door. And I'll
You
be
can
like,
certainly try.
I will say you can certainly try, but then I will give them how to do that in the mechanics of the game that we are currently playing.
Yeah.
Whether
So
that is homebrew, whether that is Adventures League, whether that is a completely different tabletop system, I will say, okay, you want to do that, and I want to see if you can do that. I am totally in your corner. Let's make it happen.
yeah, yeah, and that actually touches on something I was about want to get on is the one thing with the DMs. I learned this lesson hard is when you have new players, do not overwhelm them. That's
Mm-hmm.
a big thing that can happen. Is if people are too overwhelmed with how the game is, they're not going to want to play.
Yep.
Actually in college, I was a part of game design class, and I convinced the teacher to let me teach the people how to play D&D. I did like a 30-minute PowerPoint presentation of how to play D&D, and like the next afterwards, I was like, yeah, no one was paying attention. They all tuned out. And so what I think we should do, it sounds weird as DM, especially if you're I guess knowledgeable to the game, is just hand them a character and be like, if you want to do something, ask me. Like I specifically tell people when I hand them a character, I'm like, don't look at the sheet. I may say like I give them like a description like this is what this character can do. Like I give them like an elevator pitch. I'm like, this character is good at this. They're not that great at this. Blah blah blah. And I
Mm-hmm.
just tell them don't worry about the numbers. If you need to roll dice, I'll tell you what dice to roll, or I'll hand you the dice to roll. Just
Mm-hmm.
don't do that.
And
And
that,
I
yeah.
and I people are like, oh, like someone's like, oh, like I'm like, okay, everyone roll initiative, and they're like, what's initiative? I'm like, okay, so if you see on the top middle of your sheet, from fifth edition, there is a number. This number says +3. So basically, what you do is you grab this dice, the D20, which one thing I like to do, DMs do this. Give them a
Mm-hmm.
set of dice, but each dice is a different color. Do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you like, no, I was like, so you take this red dice, you roll it.
Mm-hmm.
That we got a 13. You have a +3 to your initiative, so you get a total of 16. So
Yep.
when I ask for initiative rolls, and basically I teach them the rules during the game, or if they're like, they're like, it's their turn of combat. I'm like, what can I do? It's like, well, you have multiple weapons on you. If you look on this section of your character sheet, you can see what weapons have on you. And they're like, oh, I want to make an attack with this. I'm like, all right, so roll the orange dice again, or sorry, red dice. Roll the red dice, and you see that number there. Add that number to it. And I explain this number determines
Mm-hmm.
how if you're likely to hit. And basically, it's
Like I said, training wheels. It's
yeah,
training
basically teach
wheels.
them through play.
Yeah.
And eventually, once you do this, they'll kind of be like, oh yeah, they're like, oh, I'm making an attack. Then like they might instinctively roll the d20 and like, oh, like doing that. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, what do I add again? And you're like, oh, you go to your attack section. So the big thing is especially for in-person DMs, if you're people like brand new to the game, get a copy of a character sheet, like make a random pre-gen, and then color code the sections. Even if it's
Mm-hmm.
just like simple like combat section, role play section, basically that, and you explain if they're like and have it on your DM screen, and they're like, okay, what do I do? And I'm like, so you want to roll an acrobatics check, which is in the green section, and they might look at your character sheet or even have their character sheet color coded. You're like, okay, green section, okay, they're instantly there, and then I'm explaining, I'm like, oh, so if you notice this list is in alphabetical order. So acrobatics is A, so it's at the top of the thing. Basically, it's like you're like I said, training wheelsing them, but it's enough that you can explain, and eventually they'll be able to read the sheet.
Yeah,
And because
I love the idea of teaching through play. I think that is one of the best ways to teach something is to literally because we talked about in a previous video about watching videos, and that definitely is an amazing tool. But I really think the best way to do it is teach through play.
trial by fire.
Yeah, it's a trial by fire. You just got to get into it. And I think another really good thing too is if you have a DM or if you're a DM and you notice that there is a player at your table who's been very good about kind of babysitting, and I don't say babysitting to be derogatory or anything, but just sort of like watching over a new player, you can always go to that player and be like, hey, I know you're really experienced. Can you sit by this new person? And if I'm not available to help them, can you kind of guide them through it?
Yeah.
Um, There's usually one player I found, at least playing. I don't play in person a lot, but I have found that there's at least one player at the table who is willing to sit next to the new person and kind of guide them.
Yeah, I have one of my for me playing in new I guess in person. This is one guy who I run games with a lot. It's actually weird. It's like he's like warehouse manager type situation. So like one of those I probably would have met him outside of D&D, and he is like the best with new players. And he's always like half the time I have him help make the new players make help the new people make characters because he's really good at sitting down and basically talking with all that stuff. So, like I said, like when in doubt, like the big thing I always say, like,
I guess if you had to sum it up in maybe 3 pro tips, what would you sum it up in?
3 pro tips. Understand their character, either through making a pre-gen or make the character with them, so you know what they can do. Basically, training wheels them in the sense of explain as you go rather than overwhelming them. And then 3 is emphasize that ask what you want to do, and I'll tell you if you can do it or how you can do it. So basically, just know what you need to know. Basically, I don't know. I think that's the big things I like to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've actually never even thought about like having and I do the same thing, I guess, online, like I was saying with new players. I always have their character sheet in front of me. You do the same thing in person as well, which is a really good thing. So then you're referencing, what they can do as well as other things. I mean, I think that's an amazing. And so now we go to our last question of the night, which is from Noah Grand. And he says, as a DM, one of the main questions I get from new players is, how is Adventures League different from other kinds of D&D? What should players expect, and how do new players know what's right for them? This is about a 3-parter, I would say. So we got, first of all, how is it different from other kinds of D&D? Adventures League. Yeah. Adventures League, well, right now we're in the new season, and it has got a complete and total overhaul, which, again, if you guys want questions on Season 8, down in the description below, there's going to be a link to our forum questions. Please leave a question, and we will if we get enough questions, we will do a episode specifically on Season 8 Adventures League. Right now, it's different because it has a set rules base. It is organized play. And the easiest way I can explain organized play is you are meant to be able to take your character from one table to the next, to the next, to the next, from online play to in-store play to if you run Adventures League at your house too, which is totally possible to do as well. And the play experience should not be different.
Yeah, it's very rules as written. What that means is what the book says goes, in the sense of DMs are allowed to do some basically kind of come up with stuff in the moment, but when in doubt, the book is the rules are what they are, and
the book is God.
The reason behind this is so you don't have the situation of I play at one store and the DM's like, oh, like has some rule. It's my first time playing, and then I go to a different store and the DM's like, oh no, that's not actually a rule, and you don't really have that situation eventually because everyone is doing as the rules are, which is actually why I actually like to have Adventures League, at least for some little bit new players, is because you learn what the rules are supposed to be. So it's kind of like with artists, like in order to be like an artist who breaks the rules, you have to know the rules.
Yep.
And it's good, and so that's why I like. So the reason Adventures League it's super rules oriented, it's super drop in, drop out.
It's
and
portable.
The best thing about it, it's portable. And the thing of Adventure League, which is this a pro or con? It's your opinion. It's mostly one-shot adventures. It's a lot of one-shot modules that take place somewhere between 2 and 4 hours, and the story begins and the story will end somewhere within that time frame. So you can show up every week if you're like, say, if you have a friendly local store that runs every week, or you can show up once a month. And no matter what, you're going to be able to show up. There will probably be a game for you to play,
Sit
and
down
you
at a
can
table.
take. Yeah, and you basically you didn't really miss anything. Like
Yep.
each season in Adventures League, there's an overarching story which correspond to the
The
book releases,
hardcover.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, hardcover releases, which you can run the hardcovers as Adventures League. A lot of people, I think, don't realize this, but you can run the hardcover Adventures League. They just have set guidance of, hey, in this for DMs, like in this section, when it usually says roll on this table for a magic item, the magic item is now this, or this
Hmm.
section, the reward is this reward is basically doesn't really fit in Adventures League, so they change it to be something else. Or this item, rather than one person gets it, everyone gets it. Is kind of
Yep.
how things are now. So it's definitely, like I said, the thing I love about Adventures League, uh, opposed to maybe a more home game, it's like, and especially being in stores or online, you know when the game's going to start, you know when
Hmm.
the game's is expected to end. You know for a fact that you're basically gonna the game basically there's going to be different parts for you guys to play in, and but different parts, different parts play you guys play in, and like I said, you're not committed to the group. Like if you have a weird work schedule that you can't show
Yep.
up every week, or maybe you can only show up every 2 months, that's fine.
Yep.
And I guess kind of going into more pros of Adventures League, which is what things like that, which I think is different, is Adventures League. You're not stuck playing a character. And
Yep.
eventually you can have countless many as many characters as you want. Like for especially those of you who like to kind of like maybe like workshop characters or come up with a lot of ideas for characters. You can have as many characters as you want, and you don't if you play one character last week, you can play a different character this week. It doesn't really matter
You
as
are
long
not
as they're within.
married to a character.
You're not married to a character. So if you say you played an up to level 7, you're like, you know what, I really don't like this character, you can decide just to abandon them and make a new character. Or even better, the thing with Adventures League is you're not married to the character. As long as your character is low level, aka level between levels 1 and 4, you can rebuild basically everything about the character. So if you got handed a pregen for a half orc barbarian, and you picked him up, you're like, okay, I played the pregen, but you know what? I actually kind of want to play more of a rogue. You can take all the experience and gold and everything you earned to that character and rebuild it to be a rogue. You might be a
Yep.
rogue named Grognak the Destroyer, but you're a rogue. That's the big thing in Adventures League. You have to keep
Yeah.
you have to keep the character name, but that's the things I like about it. And also, like I said, it's consistent play. You may not necessarily have the same people every time, which I guess is kind of where I want to go into the kind of the cons of Adventures League / pros of home games is Adventures League, you're not going to have the same DM, and you might not necessarily have the same players every time.
Yep.
The con of that is you may not necessarily get to know the people you play with, but in opposed to a home game, which you might be playing with playing with a good group of friends, and you might actually get to know each other like very well. And the big thing about Adventures League, I can definitely say, having played Adventures League for 3 years, is Adventures League kind of attracts, I want to say, a little bit more of the people who are more interested in the game than the role playing experience. What I mean by
I will
that
agree with
is,
you. I will totally agree with you on that one.
yeah, is in Adventures League, you're not often gonna run into people with grand backstories of what their character is. A lot of time, people are like, "Oh, what are you playing?" You're like, "Oh, I'm playing Elf Wizard." "Oh, what's the backstory?" I don't know. He was a sage, I guess. A lot of people run into Adventures League don't
Hmm.
care as much about their character's backstory, but that's a lot of times because maybe they're more interested in playing the game. But a lot of people, including myself, I'm like, my character's backstory, what my character's going to be like is what's going to happen through the game. Through my experience in the game is what I'm going to come up with my backstory. Which in a home game you can do that, but you might be a little bit more expected in a home game to have a grandiose
Yeah.
backstory. You also in Adventures League, with older seasons, there's kind of guaranteed combats every single time, so you couldn't have the completely role playing session. With the new season, they're trying to make it so you could be more role play oriented, but in home games, like I've had situations where like it's a 6 hour session when we're all doing but talking, and no one gets, and everyone's like fine with that. But in Adventures League, there's a lot of people who are like, wait, we didn't get to kill anything. What's going on? And they kind of
Yeah.
run about that. So
I mean,
like
it's
I don't.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to say this, but it's basically, if to kind of put it concisely, a lot of people who play AL are there for the game. They're there for the mechanics behind D&D,
Hmm.
rather than the social scenario. They're there to play. While in a home game, I feel like from my experience, people are a little bit more invested in the story, especially since it's usually an overarching story. People are more invested who their character is, how their character plays, and because and granted, like there's like some people might say Adventures League attracts a lot of the power gamers, and it might, but the big thing is, the only thing is, Adventures League, people can power game because there are a lot of power game. In a home game, the DM can alter the rules, or make it so, okay,
Hmm.
I don't really want power gamers on the game, and they can, like, in a home game you can limit or expand on anything you want. And Adventures League, you're kind of stuck in what it is. But it's kind of fun. It's like you have freedom as long as the rules say you basically where you are.
Yeah, I
So
mean it's a mixed bag on a lot of things. I feel like Adventurers League, in most respects, for organized play, I think they've definitely tried to go away from the power gamer
yeah,
aspect. Which again, power gamers, there's nothing wrong with power gamers, but I feel I really
it
do.
is a legitimate strategy of players, which
Yes.
I actually kind of also later episodes, if people deeming want to know how to deal with certain players and stuff like that, or what do you mean there's different types of players? I want to say for 5th edition D&D, it's like page 6 of the DMG is like the most crucial page in the book. It explains, like, here's how you deal with different players. In Adventures League, you get to deal with a bunch of different types of players, which for me as a DM I really like. But sometimes you just, like, I want the players who like to role play and talk in character for 8 hours,
Hmm.
and maybe home games are where you need to go
Yeah.
to.
It's I mean, I will say this. I mean, if you guys want us to go more in depth into, power gamers, types of players, how to deal with those types of players, we are totally willing to do that. Again, down in the description, you'll find that lovely Google form. Otherwise, you can also leave comments in the comment section, or questions in the comment section down below, and we will most definitely choose some questions based on your comments down as well. That is a total valid
Yeah,
way to get our attention. But I mean, I guess players should expect. I guess we kind of answered that, but to kind of put it in a nutshell, players should expect an organized, portable system where you can jump from DM to DM, from table to table, and have a concise experience that doesn't vary too much from session to session. As to how do new players know what's right for them, it's a lot of trial and error. That one I have to say is very much trial and error.
yeah,
The only way to know if Adventures League is good for you
right.
is to play it. If you if you want if you want games that are at a normal scheduled time, whether it be at your local game store or on a server like Dungeons and Flagons that does run Adventures League games quite regularly, uh, you just have to sign up and start playing.
Yeah,
That being said, if you are not enjoying Adventures League, that is most certainly not the only type of D&D out there.
yeah,
You
and
can totally go for homebrew, but and I would really encourage and recommend that you experience both forms, because there are pros and cons to
yeah,
both forms of play.
yeah. And we kind of touched on that, but I guess if we want to kind of size it out, like, uh, what the big thing is, both home games, individuals, like, you're playing D&D, you're playing with people who are interested in the game. You're giving to create have experience and create narratives and things like that, that make it like a lot of fun, and like it's pretty good. The main difference is, it's like Adventures League, pre-written adventures that have a set structure and a set time limit.
Hmm.
Home games, you can do whatever you want.
Yep.
But so an event, so big thing is, you can do whatever you want, but it might put more basically put more responsibility on you as a player or on the DM to kind of come up with the story. As in when I run home games, it's half the time I just have like a 1-page document, and I'm like, this is going to be a 6-hour session. I'm going to have to make it up as I go. So if you're not super, so basically AL's like you do all that pre-written adventures, so you kind of know what's going on, and can be good to go. You run into very different types of people, but not everyone is looking for the same experience as you.
Yep.
In a home game, usually you find people who want to have the same experience and have certain things and focus on that. So like if I had to choose, but if I had to say I had to choose one or the other, I would personally pick home games. And that's just personally, I really like the super improvisational aspect, and I kind of like the more like basically this coming up as you go. And the big thing is like in Adventures League, it's not necessarily true, but in my personal experience, there's not a lot of crazy stories that happen in Adventures. A lot of it's like, oh, this happened, but almost every single story I tell of D&D, when someone asks me, hey, what's D&D like? It's always a home adventure. But that's just my personal experience because I am lucky enough that I have had experienced a lot of home games, so that's what I know I like. But I play more Adventures League because more Adventures League is more consistent. And if I want to play more D&D, I kind of do play more Adventures League.
And I have to say, if I had to pick one, I would pick Adventures League. Again, my personal experience, and I'm not trying to invalidate yours, Lau, anyway. Is because I feel that it has an accessibility, a familiarity, and just being able to get together with a community. You know going into it what you're going to get out of it. Yes. I mean, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more of just a predictability. Not saying that you can't have meaningful stories, because I have had very meaningful stories and very crazy games come from Adventures League. And I feel like, for people like me, or who don't get out of the house as much, being able to run Adventures League online and being able to have access to a community from my home allows me the flexibility to do it on my schedule. I'm a stay-at-home mom with a 2-year-old, so allowing me to be able to be like, well, my daughter's gone down for a nap, I'm going to now run a AL game while she's napping because I can. Or I see one during her nap time, I can play that at home. And I always know what I'm going to be getting. I always know, what the base rules are. There's a lot of DM empowerment and DM discretion given to AL DMs. A lot of rule of cool. That I don't think a lot of DMs embrace enough. Yes, you still have to follow the base rules, but I feel like there is still that flexibility, especially with the new season, for DMs to get a little bit more creative, to be able to be let out of that box.
Yeah.
You can get from point A to point B, multiple different ways, but each way is valid.
Yeah. And like I said, it's doing that. But it's like I said, home games, you can be as flexible as you want to be, but sometimes you can be too flexible. Like the big thing is like, especially with Adventures League, everyone knows the constraints of the characters and the setting, so everyone kind of builds character for that. But home game, like I was basically looking potentially for a new player in my home game, and my roommate had a coworker who was talking about stuff, and she was like, "Oh, I want to play a fox." I'm like, "Well, it's not just like, okay, how I could as a DM, I can either say, oh, now how can I make that?" Some DMs might be like, "Oh, I'm super excited. How to do that work?" But in the Adventures League, you're like, well, you necessarily can't play a fox, unfortunately. However, there are things that are currently in given rules you can do that. Like I said, it's basically Adventures League can only be so flexible, and but it basically not being able to basically go completely off rails like I said, you said it's consistent experience. And if
Yeah,
you
it's
like consistent
consistent, it's
experience, Adventures League
portable.
is for
Yeah.
you. If you want to literally have, I guess, more traditional, like I want to just sit at the table and expand on the world and create a world all on my own, as a player or DM, just like we just kind of want whatever we say goes and just kind of play it out and just have really crazy stuff going on, then homebrew is more for you. It's like
Yeah.
it's
But
neither of them are bad. They're
no,
different.
and yeah,
Like
they're
apples and oranges.
different. Yeah, yeah,
Apples and oranges.
apples and oranges, definitely. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for our questions. If
Yeah.
you have any questions for us, please either fill out the Google form or comment down below so we can answer your questions. We will be back next week with another podcast. And we hope you've enjoyed a little bit of our insight and our experience as both players and DMs. And as always, may the dice gods be ever in your favor.
Good
Take
night.
it easy.
Good luck.
Have a good night.